Hello, everybody.
Welcome to
The Down Lore. I'm Natalie.
I'm Claudia, and welcome to the outdoors. It's the Down Lore outside.
The Down Lore has gone outside. Remember when SoulCycle went outside?
That was how we met. Natalie and my origin story as besties was like SoulCycle outdoors during COVID.
They set up this is more than you need to know, but they set up a little cabana at the Century City Mall, and we would go up there and have a silent disco while riding stationary bikes, and it was something. It really was something.
What a time. That feels like such a million lifetimes ago, but also, like, isn't it still, like, aren't we just barely in 2020, like 2021? It feels like how has it been 4 years since then?
I feel like when the pandemic hit, we all really just entered this wormhole. Like, I am still a teenager in my head. I'm still 19. But in fact, I just turned 24. Let's not talk about it.
Yeah, I was like telling people I'm at that age now where it's like if I sit for too long, I hurt.
Stiff.
I hurt. Like, even if I sit in a very comfortable position. Every time we record an episode for y'all, we like get up off the bed, off the couch, off the patio furniture, and I'm like, I need a minute. I need to like do some deep breathing to like not pass out and not fall over.
It is truly unfortunate, our big ages, but today is a gorgeous, cloudless, sunny day in Los Angeles, California.
Freaking finally. It's been like rainy and gross like every weekend, and it'll be nice during the week, but like the weekends specifically have been just like kind of shitty recently.
Yeah. And so we just thought, in light of this gorgeous day, and our topic for today's episode, we would record outside. Just try our hand. We're gonna pray that our equipment doesn't overheat.
Yeah, we're really putting the equipment to the test.
And we're just going for it. And today, as you can see, we are going to be talking about Frank Herbert's Dune. This is deceiving because we will only be talking about book 1. It gets very weird after that. So if you guys like this and like Dune and have read it, let us know, and we can maybe get to the rest. But for now, we will talk about book 1 because that is the contents of the first and second Dune movies that have recently taken Twitter and the Earth by storm.
Correct. Ironic, considering doesn't even take place on Earth.
No, it truly doesn't.
It's truly intergalactic.
It's extremely intergalactic. So as always, we are gonna do a little bit of a who, what, when, where, why type situation for this breakdown. And Dune is a very complicated and complex world and story with some very simple messages. So we're going to get to all of it, but first we will start with our main man, Timothée Chalamet, Paul Atreides himself.
Yeah.
Who is Paul?
Paul is just like, starts out as like just a Duke's son. He's just like a 15-year-old who's just like a little bit introverted, a little quiet, has had some like special training in his life, so everyone like doesn't quite know what to make of him, but they're like, he's fine. He's cool.
Yeah, no one's really threatened by Paul. Paul's a little bit of an afterthought at first, to everyone except for his mother, Lady Jessica, and her like coven of witches.
Lady Jessica is like low-key obsessed with her son.
She is, and like for good and bad reason, mostly for bad reason.
Right, like it's past the point.
There's tea with her and her son because the coven of witches, the Bene Gesserit, the order of training to which Lady Jessica belongs, they are only allowed to have female children, and they also can control the gender of their children. So Lady Jessica went fully rogue when she met Duke Leto, because Duke Leto, who is Paul's father, if that wasn't obvious, as the Duke's son, the Duke really wanted a male heir to his dukedom on Caladan, the planet where they live.
Yeah, and Lady Jessica is not actually married to the Duke. She's just like a royal concubine, and her whole like position within the household, it's like the Duke loves her, but like didn't marry her because he wants to leave this like position of the Duke's wife open as like a political bartering chip. So Paul is still an heir, but like the Duke and Lady Jessica are not married. She doesn't actually have any sort of official link other than Paul to the royal household.
And she went against the grain to make Paul a boy.
Right.
Based on the Duke's desire to have a male heir.
So the Ben Gesserit are like, she's not exactly in their good books. She's not technically married to the Duke. So she's kind of like in this floating spot of politically being shunned or not fully accepted by like any of the groups to which she's, the circles within which she's been moving in the entirety of her life.
Yes.
And Paul is literally her anchor. Paul and his, what we eventually come to find out is like, you know, his power and everything that he has going for him, like, is her one tether to maintaining her own spot, kind of.
And so that is the second T about Lady Jessica and Paul. Because the Ben Gesserit are only, well, not because, but the Ben Gesserit are only allowed to have female children because they have these things called Reverend Mothers, which is basically like, if they're all nuns, they're like the fucking head nun or whatever.
Right.
And they're so devoted to this craft that they have achieved like prescience. So they're able to see into the future and the distant past. They have collective memories, so they have all of the memories of all their female
Reverend
ancestors.
Mothers before, yeah.
And there is a prophecy that if there were to ever be a male Ben Gesserit that could pass the test to like become a Reverend Mother, basically, that he would be called the Kwisatz Haderach, and he would be able to see into the distant future and the past and have the collective memory of not only all the Reverend Mothers but all of the men. Like, he would just be able to see,
he's the Reverend Mother on steroids,
all of the past leading up to where he is now and all of the possible future outcomes. So like, just genuinely like crazy and psychic.
Yeah, which is like so wild because the way that it's described, it's like there are so many possible courses of action. It's almost like overwhelming the way Paul sees the future.
Completely.
So it's not like, if you remember like Alice in Twilight, she sees the future, but she sees like a glimpse of the future given the path that everybody's on at this moment. Paul sees all the like spider webs of like, if this decision is made and then it goes to here, to here, to here, like this is where we end up. And then he sees this like whole possibility. It's like every decision, like every node branches into more and more possibilities. And so he's like looking into the future at everything that could happen and has to like pull himself back into the present.
It's like in Avengers Endgame when I think it was Doctor Strange was like, I have seen all of the potential outcomes of this battle and there's like only one in which we win or whatever, and it was Iron Man dying. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame. But yeah.
And okay, so we've got Paul and his overall like development within his ability to see the future and the past, and like how he descends into that, the power that he gets from it. Like, that is the main driver of basically the entire novel. It's like Paul and how he uses his power to, or how he uses like his knowledge to get people to follow him and to convince them that he is not just like some random floozy, and how he's looking at the future and deciding, given all of the outcomes of where society is going, he at first is kind of like, who am I to like influence this? But then eventually he's like, I want to avoid war, I want to avoid jihad, and then he's like, oh, there's no avoiding jihad.
Yeah, so I mean, the crux of the book is really just, it's funny, when we were talking about it before we started recording, Claudia was like, I feel like nothing happened in this book. And while she's incorrect, several things happen in this book.
A lot does happen, but you're left there wondering, like, what? The big things that happen are not like big explosive things.
I think the misleading thing about Dune is that it's much more of a character study than it is plot driven. And in most sci-fi books, that is not at all the case. It's usually a fun story, action packed, about whatever is going on wherever they are, not about someone grappling with this crazy responsibility that they have been given by their genetic makeup.
Yeah. And I think it's like obvious because when you think about all of the more recent, like, fantasy, even like romantasy, like all of that, there's a lot of focus on like big battle scenes, and obviously, and if there's like a romance arc, like that gets focused on a lot. In this one, it's like there's a 2-year time jump during which Paul goes from like being 15 and like meeting a girl he thinks is cute, and then like 2 years later they're like a thing and have a kid. Like, that's not important to the overall like premise of the book. And then the big battle scene at the end, it's just like they shot down the shields, marched in, and then like the next scene it's like, oh, we're claiming victory now. The point is not the battle, the point is not the romance. And I get that. So these are like big things that would be main focuses in current novels, and that are, right, and are things that we love reading about in our more like recently written novels. But in this one, like, that's not the point. And so the pacing feels a little interesting because you're like, oh, like a battle scene would have normally lasted multiple chapters, but here we're going from the end of one chapter to the next, and all of a sudden it's just started to like claiming victory.
Yeah, it's a lot more about the outcome and what happens next in the grand scheme of things than it is about like the characters and their relationships to one another. Like, this book doesn't give a shit about the characters' relationships to one another. Like, really, they even Paul's closest relationships and the people he does care about are more so a means to an end of keeping him relatively grounded and giving the reader this false sense that he might actually do the right thing, than it is about their actual relationship.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of like pawns in Paul's big game.
And I guess it makes sense too, now that I'm like actually thinking about it again for the millionth time. Like, especially when it comes to battle scenes, fights, etc., the outcome is very rarely uncertain because Paul knows what's going to happen, right? Like, Paul knows if X, Y, and Z happens, like, he knows what the outcome is going to be. And so there's no need to pull the reader through the uncertainty of like who's winning and who's like, is the tide turning, like what is the vibe during the actual conflict. It's like, the point is Paul knows what's going to happen in the future. So even though there are contingencies of like, if this happens and this happens, like it kind of all has to fall into place, there's like a relatively known fact of like, Paul knows what's going to happen, and he said to launch the missiles at the shield, and so we're going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to win.
And in a romantasy, like, the battle scene is often not about the outcome either. It's about who makes it out alive and the emotional gravitas of that. Whereas here, like, people just be dying and like it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, that is so true.
Like, at the beginning of the book, when Dr. whatever the fuck,
UA?
Yeah, Dr. UA, he betrays the Atreides, and a bunch of the Duke's cadre, his close circle, end up dying, including him.
Yeah.
And
poor Duke Leto. Miss him.
It's kind of like a Danica situation where like the Duke dies, but it's only consequential to the plot, unlike Danica, because of its impact on Paul, because he wants to avenge his father for the first good chunk of the book, until the end when he decides, you know what, actually I am just gonna say fuck everyone and I'm gonna become the emperor because it was my destiny all along.
Yeah, he's like, I can't outrun my destiny now.
Yeah, Paul is, and I I wrote this down, and for those who don't know, Dune was written in 1965, which predates Star Wars.
Y'all, it's old. Didn't Dune inspire Star Wars?
Yes. Yeah. Star Wars is heavily inspired by Dune in many obvious ways. The primary one being Anakin Skywalker is just Paul Atreides if he didn't have any brain cells. Anakin Skywalker is just out here feeling like knowing he's the chosen one because he has this like special ability with the Force, and then he makes all of his decisions with his penis.
Oh.
He's like, he will do anything to keep Padme, even when it makes no sense. He is completely ignorant of his future vision. He sees it, he's like, I see you, I'm gonna try to cheat my way out of it. And by trying to cheat his way out of it, he sealed his own fate.
Because you can't escape fate.
And then he becomes the evil emperor. Wow, just like Paul.
That's so funny. Yeah, and then we got Lady Jessica. Let's talk about Lady Jessica for a second.
My queen. She's absolutely psychotic, and I love her.
I think one of my favorite scenes in the novel was in like close to the beginning when they have that like dinner where she like they're new on Arrakis and she invites all of these kind of like important influential people to dinner, including like the smuggler, and everyone's like, why'd she invite the smuggler? And she like, you're inside her head and you just have such a clear understanding like as of that point that she's not just like some lady concubine who like had the Duke like gave him an heir and is just like around, you know, just like a ditz. She's like calculating everything she does, like everything. She's interpreting everything everyone says. She's anticipating other people's reactions. She's reading their like body language, and you're like, damn, this woman is playing 4D chess.
Yeah, she wants to bring about the Kwisatz Haderach, whether that's for good or bad. Like, she just knows there's a prophecy on the table and she was playing a part in it.
Yeah, and she's like, you know, this might be kind of cool. 4D chess it is. She's always scheming. Even when she's like afraid of her son, and she says like multiple times like she's kind of scared of Paul, she's still scheming on his behalf.
She's so crazy.
And her own.
The way that she is pregnant and drinks the water of life anyway.
And they're like, you should have told us you were pregnant. And she's like, nah.
She's like, I did that shit on purpose. I wanted to have an absolutely sentient newborn.
That was even weirder. Like, if we thought she had crossed some lines, like manipulating the gender of her child to have Paul and all of that, then with Alia, like, that was wild.
She's crazy for that one.
Alia's crazy in general, and Jessica's crazy for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Intentionally.
Yeah, I have yet to like really make it through the full Dune gauntlet, but I'm terrified of what Alia will do in the future, because she is unhinged.
Yeah, I just, like, understandably everyone is scared of her.
I mean, she came out of the womb speaking in complete sentences and like basically calling people cotton-headed ninny-muggins like an elf.
Yeah.
And I would be terrified if a newborn called me that too.
She like kills the Baron at the very end.
She really does. And that doesn't happen in the movie. There's some stark differences between the book and the two most recent films. Those being, in the timelines are a little different. The events are pretty much all the same, but Chani and Paul never have a daughter or a son, in the movies.
It's so inconsequential in the book too. Like, they have the son, you never meet the son, and then the son dies.
Yeah, and Paul doesn't care.
And Paul just knows because he can see it. He can tell. He's like, Alia's been taken and my son is dead. Someone tell Chani. Someone tell Chani that like the kid's dead. And you're like, oh, all right.
You're like, well, okay. And it's just so amazing that it really comes full circle with his dad having never married Lady Jessica because he wanted to leave his spot as his bride like open for political gain, and that's what Paul does at the end of the book. He doesn't marry Chani because he needs to marry the Emperor's daughter in order to gain a foothold as the Emperor. So he really did avenge his father in that way.
Yeah, and then there's like the difference between how he reacted when his father died, where he didn't feel any emotion right away, but then like eventually he did cry and he did have a little bit of grief, and then the way he just didn't really have that any response at all after his son died. Like, Chani had an emotional response, but Paul was just like, this is a fact now. It is a fact in the grand scheme of things that I know. It is a fact in the web of past, present, future. And he never really gets past the unemotional moment.
I think it's like, I mean, he kind of had become enlightened at that point.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's part of the point, is watching how his grief differs as his knowledge changes.
And just his development as a character and a person. Like, he went from a child that had at least a smidge of emotional intelligence to bearing the weight of the responsibility of carrying out an intergalactic jihad and completely lost all sense of self.
Yeah. Yeah. He just, everything became out of practicality. Everything became like a probability, a statistic, a fact, and he just detached from like the humanness of himself.
And I think that says a lot about the corruption that power brings.
Yeah.
No person is supposed to have that much knowledge, power, etc. Like, and that is really the message of Dune. It's how much power is too much power. What is someone who has gone through even hardship going to do when it's handed to them? Like, are they going to be capable of making the right decision, even seeing all of the people that it impacts? And like the power of belief and prophecy and how that impacts what the right thing to do is. Like, these Fremen kind of expected him to do exactly what he did, but was it the right thing for them, for the galaxy, for the universe? Like, that's for Paul to decide.
Right. And there are so many people that follow him blindly and like chant his name as they go to their deaths, basically. And he it's very nonchalantly mentioned like how many people die in each of their like raids or in the big final like moment where they like blast apart the Emperor's spaceship. And it's the disconnect between the people who are fighting and like actually doing the work and the person who is like calling the shots and hitting the controls.
Yeah, it's crazy how inconsequential the death and battle and destruction is made. It's just kind of like flippantly, offhandedly mentioned rather than focused on, because that is like kind of also the point. Like, these people are caught in the crossfire of this decision that's been taken out of their hands by their own belief in this person who's no longer really a person. It's like the danger of putting someone on a pedestal like that and giving a human godlike authority over a large body of people and a nuclear arsenal, and like what's gonna happen.
Right, which if you were to think about that in like today's terms, it's kind of like what we all debate around like AI, like how much knowledge and like lack of sentience leads to problems. And Dan Brown wrote a book kind of recently where there's like an AI like computer in the equation, and at the very end like there's this big twist where it's like the way that the AI saw to make this it's like the main character is an artist or a scientist or something, and the way to make his work blow up was to like kill him. And the AI was his best friend, and the AI is just like, well, you wanted it to reach as many people as possible, and you wanted it to be this like big realization that everyone in the world would consume, and the best way to do that was to kill you. So
you're welcome.
Like, yeah. And so the entire time you're like, who's been ordering these hits on the main guy? And it's like actually his AI best friend who's been like helping him escape has also been the one creating this like mayhem of a plot for him. And it's like that to us today it's AI. Like back then when Frank Herbert was writing this, like maybe they didn't have quite the foresight of like what was going to come in terms of computers and all that stuff, but so he put that concept in a human.
It's fascinating that can still have relevance today, and the way that in this world it was shown, like it's really the same concept if you boil it down. It's what would happen if you gave someone too much information. What would happen if too much information was available and the humanity was stripped from the person having the information.
Yeah, it's knowledge without sentience. Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. And I think the context of the time in which Dune was written is also relevant.
So influential.
This was written in 1965, as I said, which was before the moon landing and in the height of the Cold War. So we're talking about
Cold War, space race. Like everyone's like, what the fuck is up there? And who's going to be the first one to get there? And what are we going to do once we know? And the whole thing about resource plundering and like all these planets. Well, I mean all, but like we're focused on Arrakis, obviously, like being plundered for the spice.
And also this concept of not only like resource harvesting, but also the dehumanization of the native people on this planet for the sake of resource harvesting. Also, just like, I mean, still relevant today, has been relevant since the dawn of time. Like,
Yeah, colonization.
it's just like,
Even on just the one planet.
yeah, it's been rampant. Like, we've been colonizing, we've been colonized for the sake of resources.
Yeah.
Forever, as long as human memory goes back.
Yeah. And so, like, the fixation on space and on, like, are there other livable planets? Like, no one had any of those answers back then. And so, obviously, everyone's like, ooh, I wonder, like, people are just coming up with ideas. Frank Herbert's out here like, let's just make up an entire galaxy. And what if we make one planet that's entirely sand?
I mean, and this was such a fucking unique original idea at the time, and since then, obviously, like, Star Wars being the primary example, but there have been so many sci-fi novels that have been just like a Dune variation since then. Like,
yeah.
Red Rising even, like, takes a lot of the concepts from Dune, and it basically is like, what if Paul started off as a Fremen? Like, that's the genesis of Red Rising, and then it's a very similar, like, intergalactic vie for power from there.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how this was literally the blueprint for so many things, and is still relevant today despite being written, it's 2024, almost 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of years. And it's been made into a movie once already.
It's been made into a movie 3 times.
Oh, yeah. There we
1984, 2000, and 2021, and 2024.
Yeah.
It has been made into a movie 3 times, each better than the last, might I add.
Wild.
Dune 1984 is maybe the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. It is terrifying. Just like they didn't have the sauce to make it work with the vision.
You mean the 1984 visual effects just didn't do the worms justice?
They really like, you need to see it. It's crazy. They like the shields that they put up, like the button shield thing. Literally, they drew a box around the actor. A box, just a cube, like a prism. It's literally so hilarious. It's really truly awful.
They put the interns on that one.
They did.
They were like,
But Denis Villeneuve's take on Dune is fantastic and so faithful to... Oh, the birds are so pretty. Sorry, distractions of outside. The
outside's wonderful.
I love outside.
I just think it's ironic that we're outside, like, kind of, like, sweating in the sun, talking about a book where they are, like, so conscious of every drop of moisture that comes off of their body.
We definitely take our moisture very for granted.
Yeah.
And I mean, also just the fact that Frank Herbert was plugged into his own world building enough to think of all of these little technologies and quirks.
Yeah, insane.
That his society on this planet would need to adapt to is crazy to me.
Yeah. What drugs was he on? What spice was he in? Was he inhaling, eating, mixing in all of his shit? Because that is
had
insane.
To be something, because what the hell?
Yeah.
He thought of it all.
He really did. Like, every single detail. Like, while he might have not provided a whole bunch of detail about other things, he provided a hell of a lot of detail about the planet and how survival happens.
Yeah, and I think not only is that to just show you the resilience of the Fremen and to, like, build an entertaining world, but also to show you that, like, what exactly is so precious and valuable about what the Emperor and all of these houses are after when they're going to harvest this stuff. If I recall correctly, spice also, like, powers their technology.
Could be.
I might have made that up, but that's what my head remembers. It is not only, like, a drug, but it also, like, genuinely helps to propel their spaceships. Like, it's a key ingredient in the fuel. So it is quite literally everything.
Yeah.
Like, controlling spice, it's a quote in the book, like, controlling spice, power over spice means power over all.
Right. And, like, Paul is like, whoever controls the destruction of it controls all of it. That's, like, his thing at the very end. He's like, well, I know how to destroy everything, therefore I hold all of the power and all of the leverage.
Yup.
Like, okay.
And
facts.
Now that he, like,
Period.
drank the water of life, I don't think he needs the spice to be prescient anymore. Like, it's not like he needs to keep consuming it.
I also
to
love
survive.
how the nomenclature of everything in this book is so specific, and then there's just spice. It doesn't have a name. It just is.
Well, it is called
spice.
melange, but like they don't refer to it as melange
Right, it's-
anywhere on Arrakis. That's like the name for it on other
Intergalactically.
planets. Intergalactic. the what's it called? The genus and the species melange, but colloquially
It's
we
just
call her Spice.
Spice.
Let's talk about the worms,
Oh, yeah.
because the worms are dope as hell.
Right. Which they start out as, like, from Paul's perspective, everyone's, like, scared of the worms. And then, like, over the course of the book, you're like, oh, the worms actually, like, the Fremen refer to them as makers. Like, they're actually very pivotal to Arrakis.
And they are the lifeblood of Paul's descendants, transcendents, whatever you want to call it, because he do become evil, so we can call it descendants, into his prophesized terrible purpose, right?
Yeah.
Because he drinks the water of life and then awakens to the truth.
And the
water of life is just worm blood, piss, whatever it is.
just, like, yeah, mixed with
They
the spice
withdraw
or
it
whatever.
from worm. Yeah. So the
Good
worms
times.
are pivotal and quintessential not only to Fremen culture, but to Paul's ability to become the evil thing that he becomes.
Yeah. And also just, like, symbolically, it's like anything that you don't understand, you're afraid of. But then once you do understand it and you know how to work with it, like the Fremen, like, they're not afraid of the worms. They know exactly how important they are and the value that they bring. And they know how to not manipulate them, but they know how to ride the worms, which is honestly so dope. So dope. And
It's incredible in the movie. Sorry, I had a tickle in my throat. The scene of Paul learning how to ride a worm in the movie is genuinely a cinematic masterpiece. I need more. I think I got pollen in my throat.
you know, just being outdoors, we're just out here replenishing our moisture, if you will. Water break.
Oh my god, I love water.
Could never live on Arrakis.
No.
Could never do that.
No.
Could never.
They would be harvesting my water within seconds.
When Jessica's, like, drinking her water out of her still suit and she, like, refers to it as brackish, I was like, bleh.
Yeah, it's
Could not.
nasty. It's really nasty.
Could not. So resourceful.
Oh my god.
But
The
bleh.
fucking scene where the Harkonnens destroy the pool of holy water on Arrakis made me want to actually die. Because this man made me care so much about these people.
And water.
And water. And, like, just demonstrating the pivotal nature of water on this planet and how scarce it is. And the fact that they take the water of all of their fallen and are storing it for this, like, great purpose of transforming Dune back into a lush paradise, and it's destroyed. I lost my mind during that scene, and it is just as horrific in the movie. Like, the scene is, they make this beautiful pool. They tell you how much water is in it, which is just, like, so many souls worth of water, like, in this pool that is meant for this purpose of making the world a better place. And then what destroys it? A fucking nuclear bomb. A nuclear bomb sent by a pale, musty-ass, bald guy.
The Baron?
So horrible. Yeah, the Baron.
Who, like, can't even hold up his own weight.
The Baron is actually the most disgusting character.
He's, like, morbidly obese to the point where, like, he shouldn't be alive and or able to stand up. And he's just got, like, gravity-defying suspensors to, like, support
and
him.
what is the Star Wars equivalent of him? Say it with me. Jabba the Hutt.
The
You're not
parallels-
original at all, George Lucas. I'm
parallels
just
be paralleling.
you.
But it's made even more significant by the fact that the water comes from the dead.
Yeah.
It's not just, like, water that they've been storing, which would be, you know, it's a big undertaking in and of itself, and it's devastating. It would be devastating to lose in general. But the fact that they are so cognizant of every single drop of moisture, and it has been, this is literally, it's like the second light bullet that Bryce fires at the end of Crescent City. Like, It's got the souls of the dead in there.
Yeah.
Like, you're fucking with the souls of the dead.
Yeah, no, that's so true.
Like, sacrilegious on the Baron's part.
I love that you said sacrilegious, because it is, again, just like another symbol of the power of religion, especially over the Fremen. The Fremen are
so religious.
I mean, and they are written as the example of what happens when you let religious fanaticism take over your culture. The fact that they have created a solution to their own scarcity problem, and they refuse to employ it because of a religious prophet that they are expecting to come and save them, and then because of that religious prophet it is destroyed, is just insane. Like, Frank Herbert, you're a genius.
Yeah.
I love Dune.
the commentary is commentarying.
It truly and deeply is. I love that, like, there are various very obvious parallels and influences from real world cultures and religions at play here. Like, it's not lost on anyone that Dune takes place in a desert, and a lot of the terminology sounds very Islam inspired.
Literally jihad.
Literally all of the names sound very
Arabic,
Middle Eastern. Yeah. And their culture is also, and their religion is based around this, like, prophet that they're expecting to come. Like, all of it is clearly very Islam inspired, but I think he is quite respectful, especially for 1965, of
definitely
the real world culture. I think that's because Frank Herbert gets it. Like, he's writing a social commentary about a white man coming in and ruining everything. He understands, as a white man himself. Like, he was woke for the time.
Frank Herbert, yeah, he was 1965 woke.
Frank Herbert would have voted for Obama.
Oh, 100%, yeah, definitely. He would have been campaigning for Obama, honestly, like, would have endorsed him.
Frank Herbert would have, like, on his Instagram account, put a side-by-side of Trump and the Baron, and just with no caption.
100%. Wait, that's so funny. No, I'm not gonna be able to unsee that.
And Fade Rotha being fucking Baron Trump. I would love to see Fade Rotha and Hunter Biden in a fight. I would love to see Baron Trump and Hunter Biden in the octagon.
So funny.
May thy fucking knife chip and shatter.
Oh my god. Wow.
Can we also, I just need to talk about Fade Rotha for a minute, because he might be my favorite character.
Really?
Besides Lady Jessica. He's just so fucking evil, and
but
it's
he's like
funny.
And he's quiet about it in the beginning. Like, he's kind of similar to Paul, kind of like introverted and quiet, and like people are like, why did the Baron choose him?
I think he's supposed to be Paul's mirror in a lot of ways.
100%. I agree. They're like, and I mean, they're cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Harkonnen reveal was crazy.
When Paul was like, by the way, we're Harkonnen. He says to his mom,
I am what I'm destroying. Awesome.
And, right. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Man.
Lady Jessica is literally bonkers for that, because she knew.
She is so bonkers. Yikes. I think also someone told me this when I was talking to them about Dune.
Boy moms are toxic.
Yeah.
And all boy moms should be canceled. Especially boy moms, except for my boyfriend's mom. She is a saint. But she has 3 sons. This Lady Jessica, only has Paul.
Just the one. Like,
and when you are left to, like, obsess over your son that you're trying to turn into a prophet, it's gonna do some crazy things to your brain.
Right. So only child, son with prophet potential. Those boy moms canceled.
Yeah. Which, rare, but some boy moms on our planet Earth do truly seem to think that their sons are gonna be the next big thing.
Right. So that was insane. She said that and I was like, wait, that is so spot on.
Like, I'm so sorry.
Period.
But, like, Timmy's gonna get an insurance job. Why are we acting like he's, like, the most special, perfect boy ever to live? You're just By telling him that, you're enabling him to go out into the world and treat women like shit.
Yeah, so fair.
And that's why boy moms are canceled. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
And well, I mean, at the very end, like, I guess there's more to see about the love triangle, the relationship triangle between Paul, the princess, and Chani, which is insane. But he kind of does he just kind of like tells Chani, he's like, I gotta do this. Sorry.
And in the book, she gets it a lot more.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a choice.
Yeah. She's like sad about it, but she's like, go do.
In the movie, she's fucking pissed off, and I'm excited
Makes
to
more
see
sense.
what Denis Villeneuve does with that in the third movie. Because the end of Dune 2 is just Zendaya riding off into the sunset on a worm by herself,
Like,
pissed
fucking
off.
pissed. Yeah. Look, I'd be
And
pissed
obviously
too.
not crying because the water is precious and she is Fremen above all else. But yeah, definitely a choice. I did love though that he wasn't scared to make Chani a badass, and he wasn't scared to write feminism into Fremen culture.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of their women, yes, like stayed back and took care, but a lot of them were like in the fucking army and just.
And they make a point to say that, like, when I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, the Sardaukar?
Mm-hmm.
Cute. It just sounds like I'm choking when I say that.
It does.
Sardaukar. Anyway. When they show up, like, the women and children are out here, like, fucking knocking them down.
Yeah.
And
they're beasts.
it's like embarrassing to the Sardaukar. You know? And they're like, wait, don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone that this entire group of Sardaukar, like, got whacked by, like, women and children.
This is y'all's peak army. All right.
Right. And wait, didn't they all come from the prison planet? Isn't that the thing too? Like, the Sardaukar are like
Yeah.
ex-cons?
They're like, they have their own little planet. They're the Emperor's like special little incubated army. Like, they're bred to be warriors. And
they're still
bred,
getting taken down by Fremen women and children. Be so for real. These people are sauvage.
Yeah, the Fremen are something else. And I think that's also, I mean, they're forced to be the most resilient society in the universe.
Yeah.
Like, they have no money, they have no water, they have no resources, they have no way to mine the spice themselves. They also have, like, a very spiritual connection to the spice. So I feel like they don't see it as something that can be abused, sold, and commercialized, like the Emperor and the rest of the houses do. And so they're just left to defend it, really.
Which, again, isn't that always the story of, like, a native culture that reveres nature and sees it for what it is, not as something commercial, and then the colonizers show up and they're like, that would sell. And the people there are like, but it's sacred to us. And they're like, but money.
We don't care.
We're going to take it all.
Yep. I love it here. The new Taylor Swift song, I Hate It Here, about escaping into fictional lands, really, it's first of all so relatable as a book girly, but second of all is it just really doesn't work when we're talking about Dune.
No, would not want to escape into that any of
we're
the
just
worlds
escaping
there.
into reality 2.0
Yeah,
by going
like,
into Dune.
Like reality, but expanded across multiple planets. Instead of being an intercontinental situation, it's an interplanetary situation. Much of the same dealio.
And I think the genesis of the world in Dune is also really interesting. And same with Red Rising, which we'll also talk about eventually. We're waiting for our Lord and Savior Pierce Brown to finish writing Red God and put it out so that we can talk about all 7 books in the saga together. I've read the first 3. I'm holding off on the later 4 until 7 comes out. But the whole idea of these worlds is that, and much like a lot of our like favorite teen dystopian novels that we read in 2012, 2013, the world revolves around, the world has ended once. Like, there was some sort of cataclysmic event or rebellion that brought the world to a screeching halt, and then they had to remake it from the beginning. And every time, in this book, in Red Rising, in fucking The Hunger Games, like all of it, it always reverts back to feudalism in some way. They always go back to like one dude at the top or a couple of people at the top, one superior race, and then it always ends up in a re-rebellion. Like, why haven't we learned?
Repeating itself. It's history repeating itself
in the future. This book takes place 20,000 years in the future, 10,000 years in the future, having been the point at which there was a rebellion.
Yeah.
And a cultural reset.
Yeah.
And we're here 10,000 years later doing it again.
The same shit.
Paul, you have the collective memory of everyone.
But then when he looks down all the lines of like the future, he realizes that there is no alternative to jihad. And that's why he's like, at the beginning, he's like, how do we avoid it? How do we avoid it? And then he realizes there is no avoiding it. It's inevitable. No matter what like collection of decisions happen between like point A and point Z is always going to be jihad. And what happens in between might differ, but it's going to lead to the same exact thing. And so he's kind of like, oh.
And it's just so fascinating and ironic that like in learning all of the collective history and seeing all of these outcomes and realizing that the only way forward is jihad, he literally is becoming the very thing that he's seeking to destroy, which is a person with too much power.
Yes.
It's crazy. It's really crazy. And it's like, it's such an existential question because it's so relevant in our world too. Like, there's so much corruption and greed across governments and corporations in our world, but like, if we were to take them down, what next?
Someone would just replace them, and then we would have history 2.0 and then 3.0, rinse and repeat over and over.
We just literally went from feudalism with kings and nobles to a democracy with an overpowered president, Supreme Court, government,
and everything being, I mean, essentially being run by the top 1%. Like, that is
the people who control the flow of commerce. Yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's just like utilitarianism can't help but ingrain itself everywhere.
Right. And like, because in real life, none of us have this collective memory. Every time someone new rises to power, it's the first time it's happening to them, and they're going to trip on it every single time. Paul had a moment to like look back and see what happened and understand the history that came before him. And even he's going to trip over all his power because there is no alternative. And he sees that in the future and he's like, oh, well, here we go.
Like, is fascism just unavoidable?
Maybe that's what Frank Herbert wants us to contemplate.
The way that last episode we talked about like the Bat Boys, and now we're talking about if fascism is unavoidable.
The range, like, y'all. We're here to deliver range, okay? We don't just talk about men with wings. We also talk about men with the collective memory and too much power descending into evil and not being like savable by their hotness.
No. I don't even think we know if, I mean, Timothy Chalamet is cute, but
yeah.
Like,
the point is not that like Paul is attractive at any point. Like, that's not part of the
never even contingent anywhere in the plot.
No.
What have we missed? What else did we
talked about the who, we talked about the what, the where, the world, the when, the cultural relevance to the 1960s, where we are now and how it really hasn't changed, and the why, the common themes that it hits on from back then that are still relevant to now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, in summary, religious prophets are usually not morally and ethically sound. No person should be afforded absolute power.
Right. Correct.
Over people and resources.
Aligned.
And greed is gonna kill us all.
Yeah. And like, there's maybe just like a little bit of connection between just the way that we are using our planet and getting it to a point where it will no longer support us eventually, which they might not have really understood fully in 1965, but like, that has become even more relevant now with climate change and all that fun stuff. And it's very, very relevant to hear how, like, if you overuse your planetary resources, you're going to be shit out of luck before long.
Dune was so ahead of its time,
So
y'all.
ahead of its time. And I think it's great that, like, it's still so relevant, even though technology has progressed so much. And, like, in sci-fi, there's always this imagination of, like, incredibly advanced technology. And so for Frank Herbert to have come up with this world that has all of this technology to allow, you know, his made-up world to exist, but then, like, 50 years down the line in real time, that our technology has advanced in a certain way where his themes are still relevant, and like the things he has imagined and the problems that he has posed and the commentary that he has proposed within it is still relevant given the changes in technology since 1965. Honestly, it's pretty slay on his
Really
part.
slay. And like especially relevant now with the precipice of AI like being on the horizon, and the beginning of this book, the rebellion being the elimination of computers.
Yeah.
And then putting the computing ability back into like the DNA of the fucking mentats or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And then also creating this like supreme being in Paul who's able to not only have mentat abilities but also prescience.
Yeah.
Like
AI. It's AI.
it's just a commentary on what happens when you take the humanity from someone who has absolute power
Yeah.
and absolute knowledge.
And it's like it's not even like forcibly taken from him. It's how you take someone with humanity and then you add on top of that all of this knowledge of past, present, and future, and how that in and of itself erodes humanity against maybe his better judgment. He was doomed regardless. Anyway, just I think all that to say, like, nobody should really want to be a religious prophet. Like, I'll just be a normal Joe Schmo. Thank you. I'm perfectly fine in my, just kind of ignorant little existence. I don't need to know the future. Don't need it.
It's also crazy that this plays with the idea of like what would have happened had, like, let's say Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad, like, had they not died. Were they not dead?
Yeah,
What would have fucking happened? Would there be an intergalactic war? Because probably.
Right, because, like, people wage wars in their names, but, like, if they were still alive, what would, and they had a say, or, their words weren't just being interpreted, but they were actually, like, contributing new words and new direction to the people who follow them, what would have happened? Everyone is more powerful in death, though.
I mean, totally. And in death, you are left to take the prophet's words with your own context. We watch it happen every fucking day with the religions on our world of, there's different factions of Christianity and Islam and every religion that interpret their holy text in a different way, even though it's the same words on the page.
Yeah. But also, that is, like, once someone is dead, more people with different interpretations of their words can still coalesce around this person, because the person is never going to prove them right or wrong because they're not here anymore.
Exactly.
So
the death gives the power to the words.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because then it's like we might read things differently, but at the end of the day, we can both say we believe in the same person, and therefore we can both unite on that front, because the person's not there to tell us which one of us is right or wrong, or if both of us are wrong. And so therefore we just assume we're all in this together and we all have, like, collective power because we're not being corrected.
This book really begs the question, what would happen if the sword was mightier than the pen? What would happen if we gave the sword absolute knowledge of everything ever that has happened and will happen in the universe?
This is such an existential book. And that's just book one. There's so many.
Y'all, Dune Messiah is unhinged. I read about half of it and I was like, I can't do this, because it's literally just a bunch of, like, people sitting around in a war council for literally, I think I read like 150 pages of it. They're just yapping. It's just a yap fest. They're just talking about what's next.
Is Alia there?
Yeah, and Paul, but older. It's like I don't remember how long the time jump is, but there's a time jump. And Paul's in charge and he's like reallocating, I don't even remember what fucking happens, but
Sounds like,
it's just a lot of political stuff.
Right. It's like a Senate hearing.
Exactly. It's like you're watching C-SPAN, but it's a book. Like, fuck, I'm bored. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with Dune 3, if that's the source material.
Yeah. Well,
all that to say, Dune was the absolute blueprint for modern sci-fi.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it literally inspired Star Wars. Like, it's That's not a secret.
No, it's not a secret, and that is, without a doubt, I mean, the biggest franchise in film history.
Yeah.
Next to, like, Harry Potter and, like, the Marvel movies, and they're made by the same people, so.
Frank Herbert was just like, what if I just, like, wrote this little wee book? Boom. Cultural reset. Spawned literally, like, some of the biggest popular culture movements of the past few decades.
Also so funny that Frank Herbert, after his death, his son took over the writing, and this man has just been cranking these books out, and they're hot garbage. Like,
that's what so many people have said. There's so much controversy.
It's just some weird fucking shit going on. They have worm-human hybrids.
Is that like later in the Dune?
Like, that's after all of these books. It's just like some really crazy stuff happening.
So after books 1 through 6.
I think it starts to get weird in God Emperor of Dune, which is the 4th book.
Oh, got it. Okay, all right.
That's what I've heard. That's what
I mean, the titles just, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, Chapter House Dune. What the fuck is a Chapter House?
We're going to find out. I might find out. Because this is my box set. I read the first book in 2020. Loved it. Bought the box set. Got 150 pages into Dune Messiah. And then fucking gave up because it was C-SPAN. And I got bored. But I'm going to have to read it before Dune 3 comes out. So I will find out what's going on, and maybe I'll just keep it pushing. So you never know.
I have never read a book that described the intricate details of sand so much. And I know I texted you this and you're like, girl, it's literally called Dune. Dude, it was like fine sand, coarse sand, packed sand, like, you know,
spicy sand.
There's so many types of sand. And like the way you're like traipsing across the desert, and like how you have to like walk differently depending on what kind of sand you're on. I was like, okay, we get it. I get it. It's sand, and like some of it feels like rock, and some of it feels like quicksand, and some of it you slide, and some of it hurts, and some of it's all hot.
Yeah.
It's just, I get it. It's sand.
It truly is sand. There's nothing really else to be said about it. It's just so much sand all of the time. And when all you have is sand, you gotta make something of it, or you're gonna get fucking bored. So the Fremen just look around and they appreciate all the different kinds of sand they have because they don't have nothing else.
They got nothing else to observe except for the worms.
Yes. Which, like, to me, the worm and the sand are kind of one. They go together. They're just swimming in it. They couldn't live without it.
Yeah.
The worms and the sand are synonymous.
It's a symbiotic relationship. It's like the clownfish and the anemone.
Exactly. You get it.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that Finding Nemo reference, we're going to leave all of you.
Keep a lookout for our next episode. May is going to be a little strange because Claudia is leaving me to go explore Asia with her brother.
Gallivanting across the world and spend all of my tax return.
Exactly.
On traveling.
And I will be, going to my 9 to 5 and then going home and eating chicken nuggets and waiting for you to come back.
Honestly sounds pretty great.
We're going to try to read some books in the meantime, and we will come up with something great for you guys in June. Yeah. We'll see what we want to do.
Look, we have some episodes pre-recorded to give you guys in the month of May, so we have you covered. Like, you're not going to be without us.
Yeah,
don't worry.
Be fine.
But we have the month of May to crank through some books. That being said, like, I was literally packing, or like making my packing list. I'm not actually packing yet, but like making my packing list, and my brother texted me and he goes like, okay, here's what it looks like the weather's gonna be. We're going to like 7 different cities, and so he's like, here's what the weather looks like it's gonna be in some of these places. Like, it might rain. Bring one raincoat, bring an umbrella. We can shop there. Like, you don't have to bring everything. I'm like, dude, how rich do you think I am? Jesus. He just got promoted, so he's feeling vicariously rich, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Even though he like hasn't received that paycheck yet, but anyway,
so real.
He's sending me all these things. He's made a 19-page itinerary that's not even done yet for a 24-day trip. I'm like, he's such a Virgo, it's insane. And I'm like, okay, cool. I immediately went to a spreadsheet and mapped out how many hours I'm going to be sitting on planes, how much like ass in a chair time I'm going to have, and how many pages of books I need to bring with me to consume across all those hours. So I can plan how many books to bring based on the length of those books and the pages I think I'm going to need to keep me company.
Yes.
I really should just get a Kindle, but I like own so many physical books, it would pain me to buy a Kindle than have to get books on there when I have just shelves of unread books.
Yeah, no, that's super fair. I will fight the battle on behalf of Kindle for the rest of my days, just because like that thing has saved me so much space and
Yeah, I can see
time.
that.
Although I've been in a little bit of a slump. I've been working very slowly through the current book that I'm reading, just because like I had so much going on at work this month. It was my birthday, like just a lot was happening, and I just hadn't really like gotten into the book that I'm reading, but I'm like halfway through now.
Good Omens still?
Yeah, I'm gonna crank through the end, and it's really good, don't get me wrong. It's hilarious. It's very similar to the book I'm writing, which has also been eating up a lot of my time and memory.
Just brain space, yeah.
Yeah, so we
Hey,
can
and I've
only do
also-
so much, and sometimes your girl just wants to like do nothing. Also, the Taylor Swift album came out last week, and I've been listening to it nonstop, and I can't read and listen, so it's just like,
No, I literally...
where's my brain living at any given moment? Probably in the Tortured Poets department.
Yeah.
And that's just where we're at right now.
I was trying to work and listen to it at the same time, and I didn't get any work done for 2 hours. I was trying to write my novel. That's the other thing. You've been reading my novel, too, which has taken up some of your time.
We be reading, we be writing. It's just, I'm not going to hold it against myself for being slow getting through Good Omens. It's a
alright.
very good book. I'm almost done. I'm going to finish it, and it's going to be great. But I'm definitely behind.
It took me, I think, like 2 weeks to read Dune, and it's not because the pacing was different and on the, you know, like not completely like one of like some of the fantasy we're used to reading. Like that was not it. It's just that I was so busy as well. Like it's hard sometimes, like life, the ebb and flow of life. Like there's some days where you can just like rot and read, and then there are just long stretches of time. Like I had people visiting, I had family in town, we had a mutual friend in town for Natalie's birthday weekend. Like there was a lot going on, and sometimes like your deadlines for other things are more pressing, and reading, I mean, apart from the podcast, like we don't really have reading deadlines, and unfortunately sometimes that's the first thing to go.
Yeah.
But
also, like I read the entirety of Throne of Glass last month.
Natalie's
So-
taking a moment to decompress.
So I needed a minute. I was just like absolutely devouring, and while that was a blast, like Throne of Glass is so easy to consume, whereas Good Omens it's not challenging prose, but there's more happening in each sentence, where like I can't just like skim or skip over chunks. Like it requires more focus and attention, and sometimes I'm eepy and I don't have that ability.
Yeah. And you know what? That's fine.
And that's okay. And here we are.
It do be all right. Also, for Natalie's birthday, we got coloring books. We got the ACOTAR and Throne of Glass coloring books to just, like, color.
And boy, was that fun.
They're so insane. Some of them, I'm like, there's no way I could color this. They're so intricate. But, I mean, look. There is nothing like coloring chapter 55. With clothes on. Don't be so serious. They're still clothes. But, like...
This is official SJM licensed coloring book. Like, she's not gonna put a porno
No.
chapter 55
But they're
out
called
there.
adult coloring books, and people were like, wait. Some of my friends were like, does that mean what I think it means? I'm like, literally no.
No, it just
Literally no.
means for grown-ups. Like, too complicated for children. Also, like, I would hope that everyone reading Sarah J. Maas is an adult, or at least close to being one.
Yeah. So anyway, if you haven't already, get some coloring books. They're pretty fun.
They were really fun.
We got really into it.
Love it. Okay, gang. We'll see you next time. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, any suggestions for what we should be reading next, let us know. Shoot us a DM on Instagram or TikTok before it gets banned. At the Downlore on both of those. And we have a YouTube channel if you are not watching on video. Also the Downlore. And if you want to reach out to us via email, you can do that too. It's thedownlore@gmail.com.
Everything is the downlore.
Pretty easy. 1, 2, 3. Alrighty. We will see you next time. Thank you for listening. Love ya.
Signing off.